going to talk about types of sentences. Last lesson, if you remember, I taught you how to work out if you had a sentence to start with. And the sentence we were working with for that particular lesson was a simple sentence, which is the very basic number one beginner's type sentence that you can write. Most little kids write simple sentences, but you're not little, so we would be expecting you to write compound and complex sentences at your age level. I went through a simple sentence with you last lesson, and we worked out that a sentence has to have a verb, went. We asked the verb, who went? I went, so it has a subject. Went where? Fishing, so it has an object. It's a simple sentence, very basic, very straightforward. I'm going to teach you today about compound sentences and complex sentences because they make your writing far more interesting. Compound sentences are sentences that consist of two or more simple sentences. Usually two, but sometimes you can go up to three. And those two simple sentences are joined by a conjunction. Remember the word I taught you, the joining word. And in a compound sentence, the conjunction is called a coordinating conjunction. And I taught you the coordinating conjunctions when we did the 8 parts of speech. They are the fanboys: for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. Those words are used to join two simple sentences. A simple sentence is a single clause, an independent clause that makes sense all on its own. Here we have a compound sentence. I went fishing, and the conjunction, coordinating conjunction, I caught a fish. If we ignore the coordinating conjunction and, you'll see that we have two simple sentences. I went fishing, I caught a fish. Verb is caught. Who caught? I caught. Caught what? A fish. With a full stop at the end to make the sentence boundary marker. So, I went fishing is a standalone independent clause, a simple sentence on its own. I caught a fish is a standalone, simple sentence, independent clause all on its own. Let's see the difference between compound and complex sentences. Complex sentences, and I'll remind you here with this little code, a compound sentence is 2 times a principal clause or 2 times a simple sentence. Complex is 1 times a principal clause and 1 dependent clause. And this is where I said, when I was talking about sentences, a sentence is always a clause, but a clause is not always a sentence. A dependent clause is never a sentence on its own. It depends on the independent clause to support it. So here is an example of a complex sentence. I went fishing because of the beautiful weather. Now, it is also joining two ideas with a conjunction. But this conjunction is not a coordinating conjunction, it's a subordinate conjunction. And it does much more heavier lifting. This is just lightweight, joining two ideas that could stand alone. This has to join a principal clause that could stand alone and something that is dependent on that principal clause and cannot stand alone. I went fishing is a complete sentence, a complete statement. There is a verb, there's a subject, and there's an object. Because of the weather doesn't make any sense, it's not an independent clause, it doesn't have a verb. It has a conjunction, it has a preposition, article, adjective, and noun, no verb. So this is still a clause, but not a sentence with a verb. So it's what we call a dependent clause. We have to have this first part, I went fishing, to be able to make sense of the second part. That's why it's complex. It's not as easy as just 1 and 1 is 2. It's 1 and now I've got to have this extra little bit added on that needs the first bit to make sense. Because of the beautiful weather is the dependent clause, doesn't make any sense on its own. And it depends on the principal clause, I went fishing. Here, I went fishing, principal clause. I caught a fish, principal clause. Two principal clauses joined by a coordinating conjunction gives you a compound sentence. A principal clause joined by a subordinating conjunction, and some of the examples, if you can read them on the board, you may not be able to, are because, although, however, that, which. There's quite a few subordinating conjunctions. And that makes our sentence more interesting because we're adding a little bit more information to what we're saying. This is very simple. I went fishing, doesn't tell us a lot. This adds a little bit more. I went fishing and I caught a fish. So there's something else there. This is I went fishing and there's a reason now because of the beautiful weather. We could have added here and I caught a fish. So it would have a principal clause, a dependent clause, and I caught a fish at the end would mean it had another principal clause. And that makes the sentence very complex because it includes a compound and complex sentence, and that's what you should be aiming for in your writing. So look for these key words when you construct sentences. Have you got fanboys? For, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. Coordinating conjunctions. Have you got subordinating conjunctions, which are the heavy lifters? Because, although, however, that, which. They make your sentence stronger and far more interesting and complex. And your writing will improve as a result of you stepping up from the simple to the compound to the complex, adding in another compound if you need to. And your work will be far more interesting to read, and hopefully you'll get a far better result for your work. Thank you.